Brazil, because I'm sure in terms of migration, there's a lot to discover in Brazil. Okay, I'm going to talk about migration theories, because I think there's a natural tendency amongst researchers to always say, we don't really understand the phenomenon of migration. We need more data, we need more research projects, we need more money. I'm in the same business as you and I say the same things, but I think there's something missing there. It's not just about more data, about more research, it's also about our framing, our understanding. How do we interpret what we find? And I think particularly in the understanding of migration, whether it's geographers, sociologists, or demographers doing research on migration, we lack good theories. We are still stuck in the 19th century in many ways, in terms of understanding migration. And I'm going to come back to this. We're still stuck in the push-pull framework. And really, the push-pull framework is fine for primary and perhaps secondary school. It's not a migration theory. Going back and clinging on to push-pull is not going to help us any further in the future. It's a good basis, but in terms of the future, we need to move beyond that, really. And this will be my major plea. And what I will try to do today is not to give a final answer about sort of this is the new theory, but I'm going to outline some avenues, possible avenues for the future, and how can we reconceptualize migration, how can we look at migration in a different way, a sort of richer way, which will enhance our understanding of migration phenomena. And I think this is really important, because I was struggling with my talk here because I know that I was going to talk to a very distinguished audience of Brazilian demographers, amongst whom many people studied migration. So yesterday I had some small talk with some of you, and what I understood is that we are struggling with migration. That's what some of you told to me, because particularly migration in Brazil, it doesn't fit in the old frameworks anymore about masses of rural people moving to big cities. Things are changing. The big cities aren't growing as fast anymore. It's not all about people moving from more rural areas to big cities. It's becoming a much more complex and diverse phenomenon. And the old frameworks don't really work, is my conclusion again. So I'm hopeful that my presentation will also make sense within a Brazilian context. And if they don't, please tell me. May I make a little bit of publicity for our institute, please, organizers? I'm from the International Migration Institute. We have a website, and in the website we try to publish as much as possible in terms of results of all our new research projects. Because the IMI, the International Migration Institute, tries to develop a sort of new perspective on migration, to try to look at migration as an intrinsic part of broader development processes. So we try to take a long-term global perspective. And we're running a series of projects, one of which is also doing research in Brazil, by the way. One of our Portuguese partners is here as well. And we try to look at migration also from a so-called origin country perspective. Not only look from the perspective of countries that, and areas that receive migrants, but also to understand what drives migration from origin countries. We also run a one-year migration degree. So any professors here or potential students who are interested in doing a master's in migration study, please have a look at the website of our institute. My presentation is part of a broader project called DEMIC, the Determinants of International Migration. It is funded by a grant from the European Research Council, and the aim of the project is to develop new perspectives, theoretical and empirical, in understanding the drivers, the determinants of international migration. Now, looking at migration studies, what is missing is really better theories to start with. I think it's a more fundamental problem than data, because actually data has become much better in terms of migration. We're not there. The data is not perfect, but I also think we will never get there. The perfect data simply doesn't exist. And we should also always aim for better data. But I think the main gap is theories. Migration studies is a very under-theorized field of social inquiry. And there are several deficiencies, and I try to list some here. The first is what is often called receiving country bias, or you may also say receiving area bias. If you look, for instance, at internal migration in big countries like China or Brazil, the focus is very much on what does it mean for the big city. And then it's often quickly said it's because of poverty and population pressure and all sorts of problems that people leave. But actually, it's not that often well researched who leaves and why do people actually leave. Is it really the poorest that migrate most? Now, most projects seem to show it's not the poorest who migrates most. This sort of challenges some of our understanding, common understanding of migration. There's also lots of state perspectives, particularly with international migration. What does it mean for the state? Is migration undermining sovereignty of states? How do we control migration? It's often a top-down perspective, not a perspective from why do people actually migrate? How often do we actually talk to migrants, ask them why do people migrate? Try to understand in a more complex and richer way what drives migration of people. There is also an uncritical use of policy categories which is linked to this state perspective. We talk about labor migrants, family migrants, student migrants, illegal migrants, forced migrants, refugees. Do these categories really reflect why people move? When we run surveys, we ask people to tick a box. What's your prime migration motive? Is that really always realistic? Do many people who migrate as part of a family also not work when they arrive? Many students end up working if they move to a city or another country, but also the other way around. So-called labor migrants are people. They have links to origin areas. They might also move for social and political motives. And migration motives are often very complex. They're not necessarily one-dimensional. That's a problem. So we try to categorize it. Let's do a study on female migrants, student migrants, labor migrants. We don't see the broader picture. There's also a short-term focus. A lot of migration research is focused on crisis. There's a perceived overpopulation crisis in a big city. There is a natural disaster. There is worries, moral outrage in European countries or in North America about illegal migration. Very short-term focus. Doesn't look